Great to be with you. This is the first webinar in our Energy Stewardship webinar series, where once a month we are going to be spotlighting the story of one congregation that's put their faith values into action by reducing energy waste in their building. As of earlier this year, in 2021, Michigan Interfaith Power and Light has signed up over 1,000 congregations in Michigan for free energy assessments and energy upgrades from Consumers Energy. And our goal with this webinar series is to inspire and equip those congregations and beyond to take the next steps in their energy stewardship journey. So the congregation we're spotlighting tonight, University Lutheran Church in East Lansing, also installed solar, so they'll be talking about that as well. My name is Leah Wisty, and I'm the Executive Director of Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. And I'm here with Jennifer Young, my colleague. I'll advance the slide. You can see us. Oops, there we go. She is our Energy Programs Manager. She's going to be helping me just sort out the chat and do kind of the behind the scenes Zoom work. Thanks so much also to Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association for co-sponsoring tonight. They allowed us to sort of slide into their usual solar stories spot on Thursday evenings. And actually this format is really similar to what they do too, because they spotlight one story and then they have some chance for discussion. So thank you for that. And thanks all for coming. All right, so for those of you who are just joining us, it would be super cool to get to know who is in the room, and you can find that chat button probably at the bottom of your screen, and you can type in, your congregation or organization and what city you're in, just to get a sense of who all is in the room. So many of you know Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, but for those of you for whom we are new, it's our mission to inspire and equip people of faith to exercise stewardship of and love for all creation. And we offer practical ways to put faith into action by promoting energy efficiency, renewable energy, and other sustainable practices that lead to a cleaner, healthier, and more just world. A couple of logistical notes before we dive into hearing from our speakers. Yes, of course, we will be emailing you the recording of this and the slides. And if you've got a logistical question, feel free to type it in the chat and Jennifer will field that. But if you've got a question for our speakers, I encourage you to hold on to that question until the end when we'll do some discussion. And you can either ask your question by typing it at that point, or you can unmute and we can just have a dialogue. This is our agenda for the evening. So we're mostly going to be hearing from University Lutheran Church. We're going to start off with a quick poll to get a little bit more familiar with what folks have done in their congregations. Then we're going to be hearing first from Reverend Gary Bunge. He is the lead pastor at University Lutheran. He's going to be talking about the Christian call to earth stewardship. Then we're going to hear from Judy Kindle. She is University Lutheran Church's Earthkeeping Team lead. And lastly, we're going to hear from Dale Ramsos, and he's going to tell us the nuts and bolts of the work that they did at the church. Time for Q&A, time for announcements, wrapping up by 8 p.m. All right, so with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'm just going to send it over to Pastor Gary Bunge. Thanks so much for being with us. And Pastor Gary, you are still muted, so please unmute yourself.
Thank you. I would think I'd know by now. So thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to be here this evening. So a little bit of theological background. Within the Christian tradition, there is, I think, a widespread understanding that at the end of time, the earth is going to be destroyed by fire or some way. And my Lutheran perspective says that that's based probably on a misinterpretation of the book of Revelation. But other parts of the Bible give a totally different vision for the future of the earth. And there's a passage from Romans that has really shaped my thinking over the years in terms of the environment and the care of creation. And I want to read that for you. It's from Romans chapter 8. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Now, I think that's a really powerful witness of what God has in store and what God plans for the earth. And that is to restore a broken creation and instead of destroying it. And if God's concerned about creation and plans to free it from bondage and decay, then we as a faith community and people of faith need to be about that too. Part of University Lutheran's mission statement is this phrase, practice stewardship of God's creation, or care for God's creation. And one of the ways that the congregation has been doing it is working to reduce our carbon footprint, becoming more green, and becoming more energy efficient. And it's a way that we as people of faith can participate with God in setting creation free from bondage to decay and restoring and redeeming creation. So Judy and Dale are going to tell you more about that, but that's really kind of the background and where we're coming from and our understanding with it.
Thank you so much, Pastor Bungie. Thanks for reminding us that this isn't just about light bulbs and saving money, right? There's a deeper purpose that we're after here. So with that, I'm going to send it over to Judy Kindle. She is the head of University Lutheran Church's Earthkeeping team. Take it away, Judy.
Thank you, Leah. Good evening. It's nice to be with other people who share a passion for energy conservation and reducing our individual and community carbon footprint. The solar and the lighting projects that that Dale is going to talk about tonight are sort of the top of the pyramid and a culmination of many years of smaller steps at ULC. It was in 2009, which was when our journey began as an earthkeeping team. There were about a group of 8, maybe, of members that felt that a group such as this, often called a green team in other places, could serve as a catalyst for integrating care of creation into the life and identity of our congregation. Next thing that we thought of was that we felt it was important that our teachings to care for creation were reflected in our mission statement. And Pastor Bungie mentioned that as well. So in 2010, practice stewardship of God's creation was the wording that was added to our mission statement. And over the years, this mission statement has served us well because it gives us a chance to keep connecting the energy efficiency goals that we have and the projects that we want to undertake with our mission, to remind people of our identity. So one of the first things we started to do, which many people I'm sure that are listening tonight have done, is we worked on the low-hanging fruit. We also had the opportunity to write a bi-monthly column in our church newsletter. And this was very advantageous for the earthkeeping team because we wrote about issues that were around sustainability, to keep that in the forefront of the congregational awareness. Next, in 2000, we'll jump to 2016, which seems like a long time ago, but we began working then with our next door neighbor, the Islamic Center. And we were interested in exploring the possibility of sharing a solar system together. But after looking at this for a while, everyone concluded that it was pretty complicated and the idea sort of faded away for a while. During that time, we went on to reach out to the wider community with several joint projects about energy efficiency. And we did joint projects with Hazlet Community and the Islamic Center and Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. Then we jumped to 2018. Dale Ramsos was on our team at that time and a real inspiration. He began to research the possibility that we had been talking about of changing all our indoor lighting and our outdoor lighting to LEDs. But this seemed like a pretty far-fetched goal. Then in 2019, the Islamic Center moved ahead with the installation of their 10 kilowatt rooftop solar system. It turned out that they didn't want to leave us behind. In early 2020, just as the pandemic was taking us all in, they surprised us with a very generous challenge gift, which would cover about 50% of the amount that we needed to install our 20 kilowatt system that we had hoped for. This turned out, as you can imagine, to be a great inspiration for us to move forward. So with the support of our pastors and council, the go-ahead was given to find the resources to carry out this long imagined vision of producing some of our energy from renewable resources. So you'll find out more details from Dale next, but in conclusion, I hope to illustrate that this summary that our journey has been a long process of small steps. I also wanted to encourage everyone to carry forth with the important work that needs to be done to achieve carbon neutrality in the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. In my excitement to get to our speakers, I forgot to share the poll with you. I'm going to do the poll before we jump to our next speaker, Dale. So it's coming up on your screens. And really, we're just trying to help ourselves understand, has your congregation or the organization that you're with implemented an energy saving project? So this is, beyond the free assessment that you might have received from your utility, just a quick yes, no, or in process. So we're seeing those results come in, and it looks like a good majority have, sort of hovering between 70 and 80% are saying yes, 14% are a no, and 20% are in process. Can you all see those live, or is that only me?
Only you, I think.
Only me, okay. I think when the poll ends, I can then share it with everybody. So I'll give it another 10 seconds for votes to come in. Just another few seconds. All right, it looks like results are in. can share the results. Okay, all right, so great. So 64% of folks here have at their congregation or organization implemented some kind of energy saving project beyond, you know, a free assessment and some upgrades you might have received from consumers or your utility. 12% haven't, and a bunch of folks, almost 30%, are in process. Okay, that's really helpful. Great. All right. Now, as promised, I'm going to turn it over to Dale Ramsos. Let me just share my screen again. We've got some slides for you. And Dale is an earthkeeping team member, and he's also the facilities team leader at University Lutheran Church. When we were doing our prep call with Pastor Bungie and Dale and Judy, Pastor Bungie mentioned that it is unusual for a facilities team and an earthkeeping team to be so in sync, and that in syncness was part of the success of what happened at University Lutheran Church. So turning it over to Dale.
Okay, if I might have the first slide, and thank you, Leah, and welcome everyone. My most active involvement in this process was started in 2016, 2017. We had the good fortune of having Pastor John as our interim pastor, and he worked with the earthkeeping team, as Judy mentioned, to get some of the things started. One of the things we did, we took advantage of that free energy assessment from Consumers Energy, and fairly quickly identified some low-hanging fruit that we had, and that would be the most effective way to reduce our carbon footprint. But as Judy mentioned, we also at that time explored the possibility of solar and the possibility of collaborating with our good neighbors, the Islamic Center. But we decided to put that on hold and move forward with the low-hanging fruit. So if I might have the next slide. The first thing I did was an assessment of what we had in terms of fluorescent tubes, and I counted about 1,200 fluorescent tubes in the building. With that and us not having any real experience with LED installation and tubes, we decided to do a simple pilot study, and that was to put the LED tubes in the office area. I contacted Philips and General Electric lighting representatives, and they both recommended a 4-foot long LED tube that used half the energy, 15 watts versus the 30 watt in the fluorescent tube, and they recommended a snap-in tube. So very simple to do. Just pull the fluorescent tube out and put the LED tube in for a savings of 50% on energy. The kicker there was that those tubes were costing $17 each. This was in 2016. And with over 1,000 tubes, we started looking for some alternatives because that would be quite a pricey activity. And what we found was that there were other companies, not Philips didn't do it, General Electric didn't do it, but other companies were producing a ballast bypass LED tube. And that was very attractive to us for two reasons. One, the first was that these tubes cost $8 rather than $17. The second was that they would bypass the ballast. The ballast that's in the fluorescent tubes has a little bit of a complicated wiring to it. So we were hiring an electrician to do the wiring when the ballast burned out. So every time a ballast burned out, it was costing us $50 to $65, $70 to get the ballast replaced. So if a ballast bypass LED tube would work, we'd get rid of ballast. So for those two reasons, we ordered a few of these tubes because we weren't sure how it was going to work out. And the electrician that had been working with us, he said, yeah, I'll show you how to do this because I don't know, I've never done it, and I'd be interested in knowing as well. Well, it turned out to be a pretty simple process to bypass the ballast and to directly wire the ballast bypass LED tubes into the system. So we started with step-by-step projects to do this. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk about a typical installation that we had. And our typical installation, we had many 4-foot long rectangular fixtures that held 4 fluorescent tubes and a ballast. What we found with these ballast bypass LED tubes is we could pull the ballast out, pull the 4 fluorescent tubes out, and put in 2 LED ballast bypass tubes, and we'd have the same lighting. So what we were able to do then in this the typical fixture in our building was to reduce our energy usage per fixture by 75%. Only half as many tubes went back in, and the tubes that went in, the 15 watt versus the 30 watt fluorescent tubes. So if I might have the next slide. Now, just before that, I should also mention that we also had fixtures that were square, and they took a U-bend fluorescent tube. We found that there were also produced now U-bend LED tubes that were ballast bypass. So the only thing is that the 4-foot-long tube was bent into a form of a U. They were a little more pricey than the 4-foot-long tubes, but we put those in some areas. Now we also had some challenges and some issues where one could argue that this probably was a little higher hanging fruit than the low hanging fruit, and that was in the sanctuary, where we had 8-foot-long fluorescent tubes on either side wall and on the front of the sanctuary. And they were up at the ceiling level, which was 20 to 35 feet in the air. To replace the fluorescent tubes, we needed to rent a lift, bring a lift in and get up there 20 to 35 feet. It was at a cost of a couple of $100. So as a result of that, we ended up waiting until about half the tubes had burned out or half the ballast had burned out before even replacing those. So we decided just about a year ago that let's go ahead and replace those with LED tubes. And we achieved the energy efficiency that we had in the other tubes. The issue here in terms of the payback time, our typical installation, our payback would be within about a year. Here, these lights were not used very frequently, not used at all during the week often, and sometimes they were on in the weekends for the services, sometimes they were not. So in terms of payback, in terms of energy savings, even though we were saving 75%, we weren't using much energy to recoup the cost of the lift and everything. But the advantage here was that once we put these in, these tubes have a lifespan of 50,000 hours. So they are going to last long after I'm gone, and it's going to be many years likely before we'll need the expense of a lift. So some of the savings here was in terms of the installation of these tubes. So next, please. We then moved to the parking lot, and these tubes, lighting out there was 50 years old, many of them. Some of the poles had been knocked over by snowplows in the meantime, and so there were some replacements. So not every pole was 50 years old. We didn't know exactly what to do there, so we looked to get a contractor to give an estimate of what it would cost to replace these poles and fixtures with LED. And you see on the slide here, $25,000. Everything up to this point, we were funding through our facilities annual budget. We weren't able to fund a $25,000 project. So without fundraising or some other approach. So I looked to see what some other alternatives were. And I'm going to mention in a couple slides the Consumers Energy rebate business rebate program. And I will explain how I met Lewis. Lewis is an engineer at the rebate center. So he evaluates all processes. And I was explaining to him the challenge that we had here. And he said, well, why don't you look at corncob bulbs? Sometimes they're called corn bulbs. Sometimes they're called cob bulbs. Well, I'd never heard of them. They're pictured here. They're large bulbs. They can be 6, 8, 10, 12 inches tall. They can be 3, 4, 5, maybe even wider. So they're large bulbs. They have a higher wattage than the tubes that we'd been installing interior. So the issue was, would these bulbs fit in our existing fixtures for the parking lot? And all we would need to do is swap out the bulb that we had in there and put this LED bulb in. So we bought one bulb and tested it out, and yes, we got it so that it would fit. So we ended up buying 45 watt bulbs, $50 per bulb. The light bulb that was in there with the ballast was 290 watt. We dropped that down to 45 watt, so we saved 80% on the energy cost of lighting the parking lots. We did need, had a little challenge, is the socket for these bulbs was in a position for some of the poles where they wouldn't fit, the bulb wouldn't fit. So we had to retrofit the socket with a bracket down to a lower level. So I decided to hire someone to help with that. So that added some cost to the process. But we ended up being able to relight the parking lot with all LED lights, 80% savings, energy savings for less than $1,000. Our payback here, since it was a one-on-one replacement, we calculate out to be about 5 years to get the full payback for that. So on the next slide, this is what we have in terms of overall energy savings. And we've done just about everything that we can in terms of LED bulb replacement at this point. So back in 2016, you say 138,000 kilowatt hours for the year. That has been reduced by 41% now. So you would initially think, well, okay, our energy bill would be 41% less. But during this time, Consumers Energy, who's our supplier, raised their rate per kilowatt by 18%. So we're not saving 41% on our energy costs. But in fact, if you look at what we paid for energy in 2019 versus 2016, 2017, it's a savings of about $6,000 per year. So very significant savings. Is more than paid for all of the bulbs that we put in. Next slide. A key for us to be able to do this was the availability of the Consumers Energy Rebate Program, the Business Energy Efficiency Program. You see the cover page of that there. Now for this program, if you want to get approved for it, you have to pre-apply. In other words, you have to put in a request before you do anything about the lighting. And then it's best to wait until you get approval. If you do that, you have locked in what your net cost of the bulb is. Because once they approve it, if you follow through and do what you said you were going to do, you will get the rebate. Now, the rebates are based on how many bulbs you pull out and versus how many you replace. If you replace fewer than you pull out, then you get a rebate based on the number that you decreased it. And you also get a rebate based on the wattage of the bulbs. If you pull out a 30-watt bulb and put in a 15-watt bulb, you will get a credit for that. In our typical fixture that we had, I can argue that it was cost neutral to put in LED bulbs. And let me explain why I believe that's the case, or why that is the case. If you had fluorescent bulbs, and in one fixture, the 4 bulbs burned out. To replace those, you would put in 4 fluorescent tubes. For us, they were costing $1 per tube. So 4 times 4 tubes, $1 each. It cost you $4 to put those lights back into operation. Now, if you decided to do LED, and if you applied for the rebate and you were approved to get the rebate, then the bulbs, remember I said we could get the same lighting with 2 bulbs LED as we could with 4 fluorescent. The bulbs, LED bulbs, were costing us at that time $8. Our rebate, based on the number of tubes that we took out and put back in, the wattage that we took out and put back in, our rebate was 75% of the cost of the bulbs. So that meant that a LED bulb, rather than costing $8, after the rebate was costing $2. We put 2 bulbs in. So 2 times 2 is 4. So it cost us $4 to put the LED bulbs in, cost us $4 to put the fluorescent tubes in. So it kind of was a no-brainer for us to keep going and find every fluorescent bulb that we could and tube that we could and replace it with LED. I should also, let's back up here. I need to just mention very briefly, and I'm almost done, Leah. You pre-apply. It's possible to pre-apply online. This is online. In 2016, the online application had some issues with it. And Consumers Energy even indicated that, because I just couldn't save things. There were other things that I needed to do. So I called them and they said, well, come in and maybe we can help you. And when I came in, I met Lewis, who's that engineer that I talked to you. He works in the incentive program for businesses. He was the one that helped us, gave us the idea for the parking lot lights. And I have continued to use him to go in and check out that everything was appropriate. So I haven't been using the online system. I assume it's working better now. But for me, it works much, much better to come in and talk to Lewis. If there's any issue, we correct it immediately, and then we go from there. Next slide. He pointed out, because he always asked, well, what else can we do for you? What can we do for you? And I said, well, I don't know that there's anything. He said, well, what about, do you have HVAC or boilers? Yes, we do. And they're under maintenance contract. It costs us $3,600 a year. He said, well, we got a rebate. If you check and if when you do the tune-up, if you see an increase in efficiency, we'll give you a rebate. So I did that in 2019. The rebate was $3,000. So it cost us $600. And that was because I contacted Lewis and he alerted us of that. Next slide. Judy's mentioned this already, the renewable energy opportunity that we had with a very gracious gift from the Islamic Center. We used Absolute Environmental Solutions to have this installed, 20 kilowatt system, $2.57 a watt. We've completed that, so we don't yet have a year of use on that, but the estimate is that it'll generate 20,000 kilowatt hours, and that will supply, in terms of renewable energy, 25% of our energy requirement. So if I have the last slide, please. So what we did, we took small step-by-step processes. These steps on the LED installation, using the consumer's rebate, all of that was covered within our annual budget for the facilities. We didn't need fundraising. We didn't need to go anything beyond the facilities and earthkeeping teams to do that. It also advantage in terms of longer lasting, so we don't have the issues of replacing fluorescent tubes, and we no longer have these ballasts, which gave us challenges. So our electrician bill was decreased. So we're now at the point of using 56% less fossil fuels for electricity than we did 3-4 years ago. And with that, I will stop.
Thank you so much, Dale. All right. Let me see. Great. Okay, actually, I do have another slide. I prematurely stopped sharing, put my screen share back on. Okay, so we're going to get to Q&A in just a second. I wanted to, so I know that many folks here have done the free utility program that Consumers offers, or perhaps that a different utility that you have offers. And I just want to make it really clear, like what we see as your next steps. So anybody who participated in that program received an energy assessment report, and that report is going to outline 3 recommendations of like next steps that you can take that are pretty easy to achieve greater savings. So what we want you to do is find that report. And if you can't find it, you can email us and we can connect you with the right person to get a copy of it. Check out those 3 recommendations and then reach out to Jennifer. We are now holding office hours. She's going to hold office hours every Tuesday from 3 to 4. That Zoom link will come to you in your email with the recording for this. But those are going to be your next step. And then with that, we're gonna take Q&A. So you can ask questions of any of our panelists, and you can type it in the chat and I can read it, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and just address your question to the panelists you'd like to hear from. And while folks are kind of wrapping their head around their questions, I wanted to note a couple things that I think are really cool about University Lutheran's story, which is, the kind of the synergy between the earthkeeping team and the facilities team, right? I think, what Judy talked about the earthkeeping team had been doing for years was really educating and building awareness, connecting, the importance of doing something like energy efficiency with the congregation's faith identity, right? Sometimes in some congregations that can be a stretch, right? Why should we focus on our facility when we have got so much other important mission work to be doing, right? And you can understand that perspective, but thanks to Judy and her team, and thanks to pastoral leadership that really had connected the church's faith identity to the importance of earthkeeping, that turned out not to be an obstacle. So I'm seeing some questions come in the chat that I'm going to go ahead and start reading. Okay, so the first one here: how does the congregation start this process with consumers? I see we also Rachel has uploaded a file. This is the business incentive catalog that you all should be able to access in the chat. So that's really helpful. But Dale, could you field that first question for us? So how does the congregation start this process with consumers?
From my standpoint, that application process, it's 41 pages. And it is a little bit complicated knowing what section one should be filling out. So I found it just very, very beneficial to make some contact with the people at those offices and see if they're willing to assist. And I can tell you, Lewis, he enjoyed seeing me come in because he was working primarily with contractors. Not that there's issues with contractors, except they are busy. They're under deadline and they want an answer immediately. They fax things in, they send things by filling out part of the application, and then he has to track them down to get it filled out. So it was taking much more effort for him to do that than it was for someone to come in with the time to just sit down and in relatively few minutes. And after you do the first one of these, it becomes easier and easier. But every time I went in and I talked to him to just check, because we put in multiple applications. And then, as I mentioned, he pointed out things that we could take advantage of that I'm not sure I would have found by looking through that 41-page application.
Absolutely. So, so Dale, we talked about this a little bit earlier when we were in the planning phase, but how did you end up finding Lewis?
I called the Consumers Energy rebate office. They're actually located here on Okemos Road in town in Okemos, and they suggested that my questions would better be answered by the people that actually review the applications. They approve them once they've been reviewed by this team. Mm-hmm. And so I went to their office to find them. Now it took a little bit of effort because they're in an office at a dead end road on the second floor of a building that is only partially occupied. Of course, now they're closed for COVID, but once I found them, they were very willing to help us, very willing.
That's great. And Jennifer, maybe could you find a link that you could drop in the chat? So I see again that we have the PDF of the catalog, but if folks could just get like a link to where that is and see the website and possibly find some contact phone numbers.
Yep, the phone number and email is there.
It might be that the online submission system has improved since I hope it has improved. They were aware that it wasn't fully operational, that there were glitches in it. in 2016. So I would certainly assume that it's a better. I don't know if anyone here has experienced submission through that.
That's an interesting question to ask. If anybody, from a customer perspective, has tried that, feel free to chime in or drop something in the chat. And I see that Jennifer has added to the chat, it's the most recent message there, that you can reach a Consumers Energy Business Energy Advisor at the number here. And there's also an email address that she put in if you want to make a sort of one-to-one kind of contact. We had another question from Dale Hulst, which is, did you consider batteries with your 20 kilowatt array?
We did not consider batteries because the array, relative, as you saw, relative to our total energy use is such that we're likely to be using what we're generating. Very little is going to get into the grid. If it does get into the grid, since we're less than 20 kilowatt, we get a residential rate rebate for that. So for our situation, it probably wouldn't be very cost effective to have a battery system.
Got it. Okay. And I see that Randy dropped a note in the chat to say that the rebate application process works a lot better now. You can track where your rebate is in process. So thanks for that testimonial. We've also got a link in the chat to the online rebate application that Jennifer dropped. All right, I'm just...
The rebate is for approved lighting equipment that you buy. They aren't going to pay for labor. They wouldn't pay for the lift. But these are projects that if one is willing to get up 2 steps on the step ladder and have a screwdriver, a wire snipper, and a few other things, you could easily learn to do this in a very short time. And if you can get 75% of the money back from what you paid for the tube, we just felt it was kind of a no-brainer to take full advantage of this, which we did.
Absolutely. Lee, I see your hand up. I've got a few questions in the chat that I'm going to get through, and I will call on you. All right, I've got a question from Murray. What was your kWh use 3 to 4 years ago that is now more than 50% less?
All right, would you restate that?
Yeah, what was your kWh use 3 to 4 years ago that is now more than 50% less? Was that in the slide?
Oh yeah, 138,000 kilowatt hours per. That's a per year basis. Is what we were using, and we dropped that to 82,000 kilowatt hour uses in 2019. We stopped it at 2019, even though we've even this year we've done a little more tweaking of the LED lighting, but of course the building has been closed, so that would not be a fair comparison to include 2020.
Okay, Charles asks, how has your demand charge been has your demand charge been impacted yet through these energy savings? Often that reduction in demand charge can be a surprising benefit to doing the right thing.
That's a question I can't fully answer without going back and more carefully looking at the energy bill. So I'm not able to answer that.
Got it. Okay. All right. James puts in the chat, gather your utility bills, electric and gas, look at 1 to 2 years of usage and cost. Do this first. So I think, just pointing out that once you start measuring something, it's easier to track and reduce that thing. So tracking your utility bills, there are plenty of online tools you can do, or you can just look at your bills. But that's definitely a great practice. Is that something that University Lutheran did in this process?
We did that. We kept a copy of each bill. So I have a file of that. And interestingly, even as we started in these very small initial projects, if we did a March 2017 versus March 2016, for example, the March 2017 was slightly lower than 2016. April was slightly lower than the previous April. So we saw it trending down because it took us 4 or 5 years to get all of these. So it was very interesting to follow how, and you could actually see that, hey, this is actually effective.
Yeah, and I think tracking, your usage and not just remembering how much you're spending on bills also helps you keep an eye on that, right? Because of course, like with anything, our utility rates are rising over time. And so if we're not looking at the usage itself, we could not be getting an accurate measure of our progress, right? Because sometimes the bills rise as our savings also,
Exactly. Yeah. We are tracking the kilowatt hours per month that we're
absolutely
using.
Yeah. So I'm going to go over to Lee. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, Dale said that they received credit at the residential rate for anything that they exported, and that was true in 2020, but that's changed now, and so that plays into the question about whether the batteries were needed or not.
I see.
The credit is currently going forward will not be equal to the residential rate. And so the idea of keeping electricity behind the meter using a battery is more practical. However, you made the right decision for your church, and you have a 10-year grandfather clause that you'll continue to get the residential rate for 10 years.
We got just under the wire. We got in on that.
That's correct. Also, your question about the demand charge. Many customers do not have demand charges. Residential people don't have demand charges. It's more of a commercial thing. So I can't speak to churches in general, but if you've never seen a demand charge, then it's possible that you're not subject to a demand charge.
I'll have to look more carefully at, there's a bunch of charges that go into the electric rate. So security, transmission, and so
you did a very good job.
I'll have to look to see if there is a demand charge.
So this question about, how much, what is the rate at which, University Lutheran or another congregation could get compensated for energy that they put back onto the grid, that's a question that I think also kind of relates to the larger picture of the rebates and such, and just, the importance of us being able to not only navigate the process of getting all of the good incentives that are available from the utilities, but also on a policy level, kind of paying attention and intervening when we can, and sometimes sending comments to our Public Service Commission, which is the body that regulates our utilities in Michigan, all of these things. So the reason that consumers and our big utilities offer rebates is because of energy legislation, right? That our legislature put into place that said, it's really important that we reduce our energy demand in Michigan, reduce our energy waste. That is a public priority, and we are going to put measures in place that require utilities to offer these provisions to help their customers do that. So I did want to make sure I offered that larger piece. So thank you so much to our panelists. I have a couple of announcements that I wanted to make before I let everybody go. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Let's see. Okay, so another next step right, that congregations can take. You can do independent energy projects that were recommended in your energy assessment report. We've also got another program as Michigan IPL called House of Worship Rewards. And this is a program that actually you can earn up to $5,000 for your congregation by signing up your members, your friends, for Consumers Energy's free home energy analysis program. So it's kind of like the residential counterpart to the Light the Way program that we talked about earlier. And again, contact Jennifer for that. Also, just wanted to plug again our brand new energy stewardship office hours. These are going to happen every Tuesday from 3 to 4 p.m. where this lovely lady, Jennifer Young, our energy programs manager, is going to field your questions. And we will for sure be sending in our follow-up from today, we will be sending the Zoom link and the password to just join that, no registration necessary. And then we've got our next energy stewardship webinar coming up on April the 13th with Bob Prudhomme from Royal Oak First United Methodist. And he's going to be talking about a larger renovation project they did there that included some HVAC and boiler stuff and working with contractors. So a larger, more complex project. You can learn about that on our website, michiganipl.org/webinars. And really that's all. We just wanted to thank you. Thanks so much to University Lutheran, to Dale, Pastor Gary, and to Judy. And thanks to all of you for coming. If any other questions come up, we can pause and field those. Let's see. Oh, I do see one more question here. Does anyone have any update as to what BWL, Board of Water and Light, is doing after the MPSC December changes to net metering and the new DG program? Okay, really diving in with the wonky questions. I don't have information on that. Does anybody? Would anybody like to try to field that?
And Grace Lutheran and Lansing got significant rebates for LEDs and for the solar installation. That was last year though, so I'm not sure what the current thing is, but that was very helpful.
That's great. So BWL is also offering incentives. This question is about the changes to net metering. So changes to how solar is compensated when it's put back on the grid. Anybody have a line on that? Unfortunately, I do not know. I think I saw that John Freeman was here.
Yeah,
John Sarver,
I'm
they
here.
may know. Oh, hey, John, do you know the answer to this question?
I think the questioner might be confusing BWL with consumers because the Public Service Commission in mid-December finalized the distributed generation tariff for consumers' energy. And what the Public Service Commission granted was the same formula that DTE received, which was, this is kind of wonky, the power supply component minus the transmission. But the bottom line is that the new credit, the new tariff, is about half of the retail rate. So under the old net metering law, when you exported electricity back to the grid, you were credited at the same exact rate that you would buy electricity from consumers. But now under the DG tariff, you only get a credit of about 50% of the retail rate. And that is why Leandre is saying that it's really important to try and use up as much of your energy behind the meter or to install a battery system, because otherwise, if you export a bunch of electricity back to the grid, you're not getting much for it like you used to. And this is a part of the tension between progressives like ourselves and the major utilities, because on one hand, consumers is doing a pretty good thing about helping your churches out and doing the rebates and giving you the consultation. That's great stuff. But on the other hand, they're raising the rates outrageously for residential folks. I mean, last December, they got 11.9% increase in residential rates, and 3 days, and that took effect on January 1st of 2021, just a couple months ago. And then 3 days ago, they announced they want another increase of 8.8% on residential home use. So that to me is outrageous, considering that a lot of folks are struggling because they lost their jobs or lost their income because of the pandemic. So we just have to, as a progressive, people of faith and organizations like GLREA, we just have to work, like Leah was saying, through the Public Service Commission and through the legislature to try and nudge these utilities to be better public actors.
Hey, John.
Yes. Yes, sir.
John, Rob Seppeter.
Hi, Rob.
A while back, we were looking at another nonprofit under the Board of Water and Light. The board had a 50 kW cap on their renewable energy programs. It was a Christian school at the time. So you're saying that under the DG that passed in early December, that was specific to consumers.
Right.
So maybe the board has not yet changed their rates and formulas. So if you're a house of worship in the Board of Water and Light service territory, it would be worth looking at pretty soon.
Yeah, the Lansing Board of Water and Light, it's a municipal utility. So I don't think it's actually regulated. I don't think it's regulated by the Public Service Commission. I know John Sarver is on this Zoom, so he may know for a fact, but I think the Lansing Board of Water and Light, they make their own decisions as a municipal utility by the board that governs that utility. So they're not under the auspices of the Public Service Commission.
Yeah, just
John Richter.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Yeah, from what I know is, I haven't checked recently, but last time I checked with the Lansing, what John said is, LBWL is a municipal utility that's not regulated, and so they established their own policy. The board established the Lansing board establishes its own policies, and they do have that. At least last time I looked, that solar incentive, and like was just pointed out too, they had a restriction on net metering up to 50 kilowatts. And last I knew, though, they had true net metering and were giving the retail rate as a bill credit for those that were net metering customers. Now, that's the last, I haven't checked for a while, though. But, and so, if you want to, you could, of course, call up Lansing Board of Water and Light and see what their latest policy is. But it has nothing to do with what the MPSC does. And like I said, last I knew, they still had true net metering and they still had that solar rebate, which was, I kind of forget the amount, but maybe it was $500 a kilowatt up to.
Correct. I'm looking at their website right now, John. It's $500 a kilowatt. Yep.
Okay. So thank you, John. And does it say anything about net metering?
Maximum, yes, they still have net metering at least as of August of last year, which is the latest thing I found. But I would think they still would, right? As John said, they're not subject to MPSC regulation. They can set their own rates.
And usually municipal utilities, they're a little bit more progressive regarding these policies because they don't have to make money for shareholders or Wall Street. So they're a little bit closer to the people and they're a little bit more open to helping groups out. So it doesn't surprise me that they have a better net metering policy than frankly consumers or DTE has.
The application says the rebate is limited to $2,000. So you're only getting the 500 a kilowatt for the first 4 kilowatts.
I see Leandre's hand up.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that the fact that you're only getting about 50%, the way that John mentioned, on material that you export, like a lot of things in your life, you have to ask yourself whether the glass is half full or half empty. And so it's not too hard to say I can buy power at half price, which many people would do. And that's what the 50% credit makes it look like. So is it half full or half empty? Definitely not as good as being completely full. So good job, Leah.
Thanks so much. Oh, we have a couple more hands raised. Oh, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I came on here tonight in an interest in some research I'm doing for solar, but I'm also an intern on that Consumers Energy business energy efficiency program. So I was able to drop that file in there. And also, Lee, if it's okay, I'd like to put my email in the chat too. If anybody kind of wants a more personal email than the general energy advisor streamline, I can kind of forward any questions or comments people have about tonight onto the respective people within my program.
That sounds great. Yeah. And would we have your permission, Rachel, to share that in our follow-up email when we just send the rest of the notes and stuff?
Yeah, I'd love to get together with you, and maybe we can assist with some of the links you'd like to send out in a follow-up email too.
Right on. Great. Thanks. Yep. Great. Was there anybody else who had their hand up? I'm scanning through here and I don't see it. Okay. Okay, awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much again to our panelists, to our co-sponsors, GLREA, and to all of you for joining us. This has been a treat, and we will be back on April 13th. Great. Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye now.
Good night.
All right.